slightly late start as we begin the conversation at this morning's Activate Talks. My name is Damani Paris. I will be acting as your Master of Ceremonies, and I'm a representative from the University of the West Indies Youth Development Program. My duty this morning is to bring welcome to you on behalf of the United Nations in the form of UNICEF, the University of the West Indies, and Team Action International Incorporated, who would have worked hard to put this morning's session together. This morning, we will be having a conversation on youth violence and its impact on our regional societies. It is important that we give the youth an opportunity to discuss these very important and impactful issues as we continue to develop as a region. Indeed, as we move ourselves forward, it must be noted that these challenges that we face, both as young people and as persons older, must be identified, and the youth must be given an opportunity to express their perspective. Forming some 60% of the Caribbean's population, it is important that young people be included in every aspect, on every part of every discussion. This morning's issue, is no different, as we begin to have discussion on youth violence and how we, as a community, seek to deal with that issue. In the audience are representatives from the student bodies locally, as well as representatives from the regional student body in the form of Island Association presidents, the Guild of Students, and the Regional Guild of Students joining us via the Zoom meeting link that we have prepared. The reason that we have sought to prepare ourselves and to set up this infrastructure is so that we can ensure the involvement of a wide cross-section of persons with a wide cross-section of realities, giving some credence and some voice to this issue of regional youth violence from the varying perspectives that the university will be expected to represent. I thank UNICEF for working with us and for giving us this opportunity, and I hope that we can have a very productive discussion as we go forward this morning. Therefore, without further ado, I want to introduce Ms. Muriel Malfico, the Deputy Representative and Officer in Charge of UNICEF, to give remarks on their behalf. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and a special good morning to our audience that is joining us in the different campuses across the region. It is such a pleasure to be here this morning, and a real pleasure to be surrounded by young people, vibrant people in the room. I'm delighted to be here. This particular session, as you heard, is hosted by the University of West Indies, the Youth Development Program, and it's also co-hosted by the Team Action International with support from UNICEF Office for Eastern Caribbean area. We are honored and delighted to be partners in this important initiative. I want to give special recognition to the Acting Minister, Senator Husbands, who is with us this morning. It is always good to have the voice of policymakers, and it is good for policymakers to hear from the young people. So I'm delighted, sir, that you are here with us to hear direct from the young people their perspectives on violence and crime in the region. But more importantly, their solutions or ideas about possible solutions to how we can address issues of violence and crime in the region. I would like to make a special acknowledgement and to express special thanks to the UE and Team Action International for supporting UNICEF to organize today's Activate Talk. I want to applaud especially the selection of the topic. The topic of violence could not be a more fitting topic for this region, for this time. So I want to applaud you for selecting this topic and for standing up to come up with solutions on how we can collectively address this issue in the region. We all know that violence remains an all too real part of our lives. We see it, we hear it, we read about it, we experience it. regardless of our social backgrounds, whether you're from a rich family or a not so rich family, regardless of your religious affiliation, regardless of where you live, violence is pervasive and violence affects everybody. It knows no barriers. The World Bank study, which was done in 2017, it issued in 2017 actually, just a few months ago, highlighted the issue of violence in the Latin American region. And I would like to share some of the things that came out of that study. The first issue is that the study warns that violence is a major challenge for the Latin America and Caribbean region, and that it has high costs in terms of human life and development. The report by the World Bank paints a very grim picture. It is a picture of communities that are affected by violence, that are plagued by homicide, that are affected by psychosocial issues that are related with violence. Clearly, this is not the Caribbean we want. It is not the Caribbean we want for ourselves or indeed for future generations. We also know from research that children who grow up in violent households or in violent communities, they tend to internalize that behavior as a way of resolving disputes. They repeat the pattern of violence that they have experienced in their lives, and they tend to use it on their peers, and later on their spouses, and later on their children. So it becomes a vicious cycle of violence. The peer-to-peer violence that we see should therefore be seen in a broad context of how children experience violence in the early lives. But I don't want to end on a negative note, because evidence also shows us that ending violence is in our hands. Ending violence is possible, and it starts with you, it starts with me. And so that is what has brought us here today, the realization that you and I and all of us together can make a difference. We can contribute in our small way to changing the communities that we live in. And so that is the purpose of today's meeting, to hear from your perspectives what you see as the solutions. You are here today to send a strong message that confronting and ending violence is possible. And in the words of Mahatma Gandhi, you must be the change you want to see in the world. We must be the change we want to see in the world. Adolescents and youths must be at the forefront of tackling these serious issues and seeking solutions. So today is about you. We want to make sure that you have your say. Thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing from you and your ideas on how we can collectively address violence in this region and create a better world for ourselves and a better world for future generations. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Mafiko. Thank you very much for those remarks. Next on the agenda, I would wish to invite Mr. Kevin Manning, who is the Project Coordinator for External Affairs and the Ambassadorial Corps from the University of the West Indies Youth Development Program, to bring remarks on our behalf. Mr. Manning.
Senator husbands, Ms. Mafiko, students, partners, all of you, good morning. This Activate Talks program, spearheaded by UNICEF, is a unique and exciting initiative. The rising incidences of youth violence continues to pose a significant difficulty across the Caribbean region. The UWI Youth Development Program, having noticed the rise in crime in territories such as the Bahamas, Belize, St. Lucia, and Trinidad and Tobago, to name a few, and having understood the importance that discussion as a useful and necessary tool on critical issues can have in alleviating and rectifying entrenched societal concerns, in this case youth violence. To this end, we have partnered with UNICEF and Team Action International to examine this issue as a regional matter. Questions such as, what are the causes and effects of youth violence? Is this the only factor, or are there a multiplicity of factors that have led to the rise in youth violence across the Caribbean region? These are but only two of the questions which must be answered in order to arrive at a decisive conclusion. As a result, we, as a region, must have discourse on this issue. Today's event, this Activate Talks, marks the beginning of necessary and vital dialogue on this topic, led by those who it has the possibility of impacting and affecting the most, the region's young people. Today, we have members of Barbados' secondary schools, members of select country associations at the Clayfield campus, the outgoing and incoming Guild councils, both live and those present with us via streaming from across the Caribbean region, and our audience through social media. They have come together to present their opinions and discuss the proposed issue at hand, and how best can we, as a region, move forward from this point. We have truly sought to make this a regional event, to explore this issue of regional youth violence and work towards finding a solution. We have given the youth of the region the platform, and we have given you the voice on this issue that affect your very livelihoods and your very future. I look forward to not only the discussion that is had here today, but the presentations this morning, as we progress with this discussion of violence in our regional societies and the path to a safer Caribbean. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Manning, for that intervention. At this time, we will get into the Activate Talks portion of our program with the presentations by these various students' representatives that we have asked to make presentations this morning. I would wish to start with Mr. Kai Bridgewater, who is the student representative and president-elect of the Clayfield campus. Mr. Bridgewater is a Jamaican and a person who I'm sure will have a wonderful intervention, given that he is given the gift of the gab, as you see. I asked him now to come and make a presentation on his perspectives on youth violence and violence effect on the region. Mr. Bridgewater, if you will. Thank you.
All right, so protocol being established. Firstly, I'd like to congratulate and thank for everyone for coming out, because all the students in front of me are young leaders, persons that saw it fit to come and be a part of this discussion so that we can be the change we want to see. Thank you for UNICEF and the YDP program for allowing us this space so that we can speak about such a topical problem. And Ms. Mafiko said, as she rightly said, affects all of us. Whether we're from uptown, downtown, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter your socioeconomic grouping, your religion, it's pervasive. Now, what is youth violence? So when Mr. Paris had asked me to speak about it, I said, sure, you should speak at these things, right? And then I look back and when I went home, I was like, but what is youth violence? Is it, or who is it? It's affecting, the youth, it's affecting the victims, or is it the persons who are doing, the actors? So then I said, you know what? I'm going to talk about both, right? So I'm not leaving out anyone. So I spoke on what's young people. So now youth can be described as persons under 18, but to me, it goes much further than that. My mother, she's over 50, and she would say she's still young, right? So it doesn't matter. Like, youth is relative, it's subjective. But youth violence affects all of us, and it's very serious. So time to get into the meat of the matter. Now, forgive me, because I didn't know, I knew youth violence was something that was affecting us, but I didn't know the extent to which it was affecting us. Now, I looked up some statistics, did my research. It says youth 25 years or younger are responsible for 52% of arrests for major crimes. Youth 30 years and younger are responsible for 73% based off of WHO's statistics. Now, that's ridiculous. 73% of major crimes conducted by the youth, there must be something we can do to stop it. Now, what causes it? Because everything has to be broken down. Talk about cause, effects, and solutions. Now, causes. The first thing I would link youth violence to is lack of employment, lack of jobs. In most Caribbean countries, the statistic is 40% of youth, the statistic in each Caribbean country is 40% or more for youth unemployment. So the youth don't think they have an alternative. They think that, oh, well, I can't get a job this way, so what I have to do, join a gang, pick up guns, drugs. I'm sure that's the reality in most Caribbean countries. They don't think they have opportunities. And even, it goes even further than that, because it goes to, you can link it to education. Now, I'm interactive, so how many of you guys have those schools in your countries that you don't really want to go to? You're doing common entrance and you say, I'm not going to that school. You get me? Because the reality is we have a couple schools in each of the Caribbean territories that are top. You have your Combermares, you have your Campions, and then you have your St. Joseph's Convent, right? Right? And then you have the schools like Papine, etc., that you don't want to go to. It's not about, I think that, yes, education, the opportunities for education has risen in the region, but the access to quality education is still poor because you have teachers in certain schools that have full-time jobs elsewhere. How are they supposed to be teaching the students if they're working in a bank as a teller and the students don't see them half the semester and you expect the students to do well and to get past the CXCs and be able to matriculate into university? The next point I have is lack of leadership structures in the OECS. So I spoke to some persons, and what I found was, unlike Jamaica, in the OECS coming through the school program, you don't have student councils, student governments. I heard in St. Vincent, the community college doesn't have a student guild. Now, these are things that help make leaders. Leaders aren't just born, you're not just born as a leader. It comes from when you're coming up, you're small, you get involved, you want to represent others. So then who do these people look to? Then it goes to role models. Because these young persons, they look to the men on the block. Because they don't have the role model, they don't have the education, they don't have the opportunities either. And so they say, who can I aspire to be like? A lot of them come from broken homes. The UN spoke about a breakdown in family structure as one of the main causes of youth violence. So they say, well, I don't have my daddy, and there's no one to look to. So they say, well, the Don on the block, he's rich. You see him with the fancy car. You see him with all the girls. So they say, look, I want to be like him when I grow up. And so they pick up guns. They pick up drugs. They do anything to be like him. Why don't we find ways to give them role models, give them people to look up to? They don't even look up to the politicians, which is sad, because those are the leaders, right? Next thing I want to talk about is the effects. Now, I have a statistic I got from the United Nations organization where it said that in Jamaica alone, $529 million a year, US dollars a year, is lost due to crime. If there was a 1% reduction in crime, youth crime, in Jamaica, our tourism industry would be boosted by $35 million per annum. So you can see just the economic and the financial problems that are associated with youth crime, youth violence. So then, if we can see it from that standpoint, we can know it's everybody's business. Youth crime is everyone's business because we all want to see our economies go forward, move forward. We want to be competitive, right? But it's not even just about the money, because I think people look at the money too much. It's about just the social problems that are associated with youth crime. When we look to our leaders, right? Now, I'm glad we have a policymaker here, but Senator Husbands won't be here forever. So who's going to take over? We're losing our leaders in those early ages. the same lack of education and employment. We're losing them. These are people who could have made a difference. The next thing is our societies are being broken. We end up having these big class margins, and we say, oh, we don't want to go to that area. Oh, I'm uptown. Because of that place is known for youth crime. No, then that's how we end up marginalizing our society and breaking it up. When we should be inclusive. It's one region, it's one country. It's our country, it's our region. So we should be building up these areas where youth violence is prevalent. Now, as I said, causes, effects, solutions. Because we can sit here and speak about all the negatives, but we have to find ways to make positive change. Because where does the change start? With? All right, with us. The change starts with us. So I'm glad we have a policymaker here, because there's some things some things have to start at the top, some things are grassroots. So at the top, we can always say, oh, create jobs, but we all know the government is trying to create jobs. They want to look good, they want to facilitate economic growth. So I didn't even put that down as a point, because job creation is something that every government is striving to do. So what else can they do? What I think is they need to put structures in place in the schools, allow for youth leadership programs, develop leaders from young. The next thing that the governments can do is they can implement, they can boost sports. Now people think that sports are just idle time and thing. But what's the saying? I don't know if it's a Caribbean saying or a Jamaican saying, but the devil finds time for idle hands. So you give the students something to do. Let them play some cricket. Let them play some football. Because when the region does well, when these persons do well in their sports, the region looks good, We get international recognition. So let them develop their sports. Not everybody's academically inclined. Not everybody's academically inclined goes into another point. Vocational and technical opportunities. Too often we look down on persons who want to be masons, carpenters, electricians. But not everybody's up here. Some people are with their hands. Develop everyone. It's not just about science and law students, med students. It's about everyone. Develop our human resources. Now, what can we do as young people? What I first and foremost would like to say is that the Guild of Students under my tenure, and you can ask any of these students or any of my counselors, is we're geared towards outreach. So what I plan to do is, and I would love to have the island associations on board, we'd create a fund, and we'd go into our inner city community, and we would like to, an inner city community with a school, and we would donate books to the school. From grade 4, grade 5, grade 6, anywhere we can help, we donate books, so that these students don't have to go sit their common entrance without a textbook. Because I know how essential textbooks were when I was growing up, right? It's about developing our region. It might not be our country, but it's our region. And we need to be the change we want to see. Mentorship programs. How many of you guys are aligned with a mentorship group? 2. And we're the young leaders of tomorrow. Is that cutting it? No. We can go into the inner city communities and mentor the students. Show them that there are persons who care about them. They have role models. There are things to aspire to, more than just being on the block. Because everybody can tell you that being a Don, yes, you have 2 problems. You either die early, or you're always looking behind your back. You're paranoid. Why would you want to live a life like that? For instant gratification, no, show them long-term stability. Show them that, yes, you can come to the University of the West Indies, be taught by regionals who've elevated themselves to the status of professors and lecturers. Aspire to be like them. Take our region forward. Show them the benefits of Caribbean integration from such a grassroots level. That's how you change the mentality, and that's how you affect change. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen because we stand here in a forum speaking about it. Lastly, it's really just more has to do with community outreach, not just mentorship programs, but going into the communities and feeding them. joining charitable organizations like Rotary, Kiwanis, Lions Club, and giving back. Because that's what it's about. We can't do it we can't say we want something to change and do nothing about it. Let's go into the communities. Let's be the change we want to see. Let us take up the mantle. As young leaders, we need to know that it's not just about talk, but it's about action. Thank you very much.
Pleasant good morning again, and thank you, Mr. Bridgewater, for that intervention, that spirited intervention. I wish to now invite Mr. Shaquem Howell, who is our second gentleman speaker for this morning and presenter, who is a representative of a student council, as observed Mr. Bridgewater here in Barbados, at the Corrigan Parish School, if I'm not mistaken. So, Mr. Howell, if you will, your presentation this morning. Thank you so much.
Good morning. Senator husbands, Ms. Mahiko, fellow guests, good morning. This morning, I'm going to speak about a personal experience within being a victim, also as a very hurt and emotional child when youth violence happened to me. Going to school in my early days, bullying was not really kind. Bullying from the hands of teachers, bullying from the hands of students. But I stand here now confident because of some people being able to just change each person. I was becoming a person of agent of change. We as young people have to become agents of change. We need to look at one another, embrace one another. We need to see more love. We need to go into the homes, the communities. We need to look at the family structure once again. Yes, there are programs that are there to help young people, but when they come to school, they're not really interested. At my school, they're compulsory for the first year. But then after the first year, where are the activities gone? What do the children do with their time? We need to take a critical look at what we are doing on the youth development at hand. As deanery representative for the youth program of the Anglican Church and the province of the West Indies, and being to have the opportunity to go to Grenada last year and interact with many of my Caribbean peers, we recognize we have a serious issue when it comes to youth development on a whole. Yes, education is free, but we as young people today say our parents have it, so is us. We're going to inherit it. We as young people need to recognize that God blesses the child that has his own. We as young people need to start to stand up and take things with open hands. Stop saying, oh, well, my friend could do it. No, we need to grasp every opportunity. That's the issue that we are facing today as young people. Young people just rely on everybody else to do everything for them. Therefore, then, all the free time they have, they then find themselves in gangs, as mentioned before, and get themselves into behaviors which are not appropriate for their ages. Then bring the problem of abuse within homes, emotionally, verbally, mentally, and sexually. We, as young people, need to stop being silent agents. We need to speak out. We need to stand up, and we need to come together in unity. Yes, I can stand here and go on forever, but at the end of the day, most of it has already been said. There's nothing really that you can add. Yes, statistics are there, but we need to come together, sit at a round table, and find the solutions. Solutions are in place. As a member of the Duke of Edinburgh program, yes, I'm always busy, always doing something, always in the communities. But then we have another problem. When we go to schools, children come to school late because they would like to avoid praise. The link between the churches and the schools are missing. Spirituality, the lack of a deity. We, as a human race, must believe in something higher than us in order to keep the sanity. So we don't have to be looking back over our shoulders all the time, as said before. We need to build back the bridge. We need to go back in the past and look at the formula which was working, which produced great persons here sitting down before me. Because if you have made it, so can I. So can others. So where are we going wrong? Yes, we know every person is not mentally academic. Yes, we know some people are great with their hands. But at the end of the day, the barber can still make the same $6,000 that you're getting paid for sitting down being a teller the whole day. And probably even more. We need to encourage our young people to become entrepreneurs, to hold the globe within our hands, to always believe that nothing is outside of our gaps. I thank you this morning.
Thank you again, Mr. Howell, for that intervention. At this point, I want to invite Deirdre Offer-Brewster to make her presentation. She is our lone female representative this morning, but I'm sure she will do well to carry the flag of the young women who have been leading the Caribbean and to make comments on the effects of violence from that perspective as a young lady herself. So I will invite her to give and bring comments on behalf of the young women in the region. Thank you.
Good morning. This morning, I was told I have to talk about youth violence, and I was very frightened. Still am, but it's a very important topic, and we're even doing it at school. At school, at home, you see violence everywhere. And to be quite honest, I'm scared of it myself, but mostly it's to fit in, especially at school. People be getting gangs. People want to fit in, so they're going gangs just to be it. But that's not what it should be. You should be yourself. You shouldn't be fighting just because you want to fit in. You should be learning. But in my experience, it hurts because you lose a lot of family to violence. And you really need to come together and do something about it. It has to end. It's not fun at first. I see people play fighting just for fun, but at the end, it's turning to real fights. Where you want to hurt yourself just to fit in and just to have fun, it doesn't make sense. Just go to school, learn. Don't be in gangs, don't have guns, don't be shooting people all the time. At the end of the day, which part it can lead you? In the grave, and at the end of the day, a lot of people can be hurt by it. It doesn't make sense. And I don't really have much to say, but I just want to get the message across that it really has to stop. And thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Offer-Brewster, for that almost tearful presentation, reminding us of the effect of gangs in secondary schools and the effects that it has on our region. At this time, I wish to go into our presentation, our discussion aspect of the program, and I will ask our facilitator for the discussion, Ms. Donatal Cox, to come to the podium, and I'll invite our presenters to join us on stage at in the couch, really, so that we can have a discussion and have some interaction with our colleagues in the audience and across the region. So I'll just give them a moment as they come. During this period, I will also be trying to ensure that we feed some questions to the moderator. So I will abandon the podium in favor of another microphone so that I can ensure that we can facilitate this morning's discussion. So, Ms. Cox, and the presenters. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Protocol having been established. This morning, well, I should not say this morning, Mr. Paris, Demanding Paris, asked me to facilitate the discussion on youth violence across the region. Having listened to our presenters this morning, I must say I am highly encouraged that the young people are recognizing that there is a problem as much as we, according to Demanding, the older folk, recognize that there's a problem. I still consider myself a youth, and I will consider myself a youth until I'm 106 years old. And because of that, youth violence is very, very important to look at. Now, I'm a school counselor and a mother of two. And with respect to the effect that youth violence has on the society and where we come from, we talk about it every day. From how we treat each other in a very simple situation like a car being cut off, to how we treat each other when we are at a party and somebody decides, I don't feel like dancing with you. All of that encompasses violence. And the problem where youth come along is that, as was said earlier, it is passed down from, literally from generation to generation. With all of the presentations this morning, I noticed, because I'm a very young person, the absence of the mention of social media in the whole aspect of youth violence as well. And I find that that is very important to mention because many of us may not have an actual experience of violence, whether it's in school or in our communities. I myself cannot stand here and tell you that when I was growing up, I was exposed to a lot of the violence that happened in my area. I grew up in Canada, and I was in one of the suburbs. So when I became 17 years old is when I joined the program. I went into the inner city, that's where we saw a lot of violence. Violence meted from police to the general residents of the area. Violence meted within the general population of the area, youth on youth. And I had a big mouth at that time. I still have a big mouth. And we were always telling people what they should and shouldn't do. But my children did not have that same experience. But they are greatly impacted on violence. Every time they turn on their YouTube or receive a WhatsApp message, and they see the latest fight. They see the latest beheading, and it gets worse and worse and worse. I myself sometimes, I get caught in what's called the grapevine, or the vine at night, and I may end up seeing an hour or two of extremely violent behavior that is not staged, actual. And we get to a point where we get desensitized to it. And violence has become normal. It is the new norm. And that is our problem. So when we are trying to deal with violence in school and tell students about other ways of dealing with stuff, with conflict, we are often meted with, ma'am, you ain't know nothing, you know. It's normal. That ain't nothing. I ain't care. And that is what we have to fight against. Because as we stand here and say that we are the change that we want to be, we have to realize that there are processes out there that are fighting against us even recognizing that we need to change. So I'd like us to look at that this morning as we open up the discussion. So just to bring out some of the points that were mentioned earlier, I love statistics. And there's nothing that gets your attention more than how much money is not being spent the way we want it spent. Do we want to be spending so many thousands of our dollars in incarceration, in rehabilitation of things that should not have had to been that bad to start with? Do we want to spend all of our money in trying to find out how we're going to secure families after breadwinners or potential breadwinners have been killed because of violence? Let's look at how our money is being spent. That's the first thing. the fact that a lot of the crime is said to be committed by the youth under the age of 30. That's another statistic that's appalling, 70%. If 70% of our youth are in this particular category, what's going to happen with those people that we need to take our society forward? There's only about 30% of the old people committing crimes, essentially. So we have some work to do there as well. What I did like was the suggestions put forward to how we can do the change, get what we want, boosting of sports, looking at our families, building our families up. I love the spiritual aspect of it because we are tripart beings. We are the body, mind, and soul. We spend a lot of time on the body. We spend a little bit less time on the mind. I don't think we spend much time on the soul at all. And we do have quite a number of young people who look and tell you, I do not believe in God. As opposed to, I don't believe in your God. I don't believe in God. I believe in me. Live for today, and that's it. So we do have some work to do in that area, all right? And I also felt the pain of our last presenter, and I think that's where a lot of us stop. It hurts, it's sad, it's scary. And sometimes when we're caught in that emotion, it's difficult to see the way out. But this morning, I want you all to share your thoughts on the way out. We know the problems. We know the effects of the problems. We feel it. It's the solutions we want. So I'm opening the floor this morning. I do believe Damani has said we also have contributions coming via Facebook, I guess WhatsApp, but we're going to start with you. I believe there are going to be microphones distributed amongst the audience, as well as here on the stage with our presenters. And the question now to you is, where do we go from here? That's the first question. This morning, after we leave this room, what are we each going to take away? What are we going to do to start to make that change? Okay, look at that question. What are we going to do when we leave here? Are there any effects of violence that you know of, that you have not heard mentioned this morning, that it would be good for somebody else to know of so that they can know what they're going to do from here? And solutions. What solutions have you got that you haven't heard yet that's going to help somebody else decide, when I leave here, I am going to bam, bam, bam. And I'll come back in every now and then just to summarize and move us on. We have up until, I believe, 11:45. Mr. Paris, how much time do we have?
Hello?
Yeah,
Yes,
there we go.
very good. Yes, we should have until about 11:45 to make this presentation. And I'll just want to throw out one of the first questions that we were asked on the Facebook while I'm here. How do we define quality education in colleagues' opinion? And in the context of violence, how do we define this quality education in the context of how we avoid youth violence in the first place? What do you guys think?
Okay. Now, do you want me to answer that first, or I'll throw it out to you? How do you define quality education, especially in the context of violence? Okay. Anybody care to? What's quality education?
Hello? All right. So I spoke about quality education. Now, to me, quality education doesn't mean exceptional education, but it should be the minimum standard. The education which allows the students to go into the exams and pass so they can matriculate to the next level. An education that the students are being given the amount of attention necessary to do well in their exams, and to it's not just about exams, but to grasp the concepts, because knowledge is power. And when I spoke about a quality education, I meant there are too often situations where students, they're not seeing the teachers aren't coming to class. When the teacher comes to class, they're not doing anything meaningful. They're not going, the curriculum is set in a way that it's supposed to cover all that needs to be covered. And when I say a quality education, I mean that minimum standard has been covered. That's what I mean by quality education. It doesn't have to be exceptional, but it needs to be at least at a certain standard. That's what I meant.
Anybody else? There's a microphone there. Is there going to be a microphone being circulated? Right, okay.
So if I make a, good morning. one and
Morning.
all. If I make a comment now, it saves me having to make a comment later. Let me say, first of all, I am in the Ministry of Education. I'm a trained teacher, taught in the elementary schools in Barbados for quite a few years. As a matter of fact, Mr. Reminded me this morning that I taught him at primary school. And he remembered my sending him to do some research on Christopher Columbus. But that's by the way. The issue of quality education. As I said, I'm in the Ministry of Education. I'm a trained teacher for many years. And I have a history in student leadership and so on and so forth. What I accept Mr. Bridgewater's definition of quality education, which I think is the standard definition. Nowadays, my wife is also a school principal, and we have these long discussions about quality education. But quality education for me nowadays is not about exams or passes. That is important. One does not want to underestimate that. But we say, my wife and I, when we discuss her school, that when those little children leave the street and enter the school, it must be different what goes on in there, whether it's maths, whether it's singing, whether it's games, must be different from what happens in the society. And the first aspect of that is discipline. I don't mean discipline in the sense of punishment and what I got, and maybe what Mr. Thing got from me. I don't mean lashes. I mean discipline in the sense of that there is order. That because what we have experienced is that in a lot of the young people's lives, a lot of children's lives, there's no order. They do anything because there's no supervision at home. They're on the streets. The police, in my capacity now, dealing with the police and so on, social workers, the students are on the street at night and so on, late hours, because there's no discipline. So when they come through that door, the first thing is that there's discipline, there's order, there's activity, there's a spiritual experience, not necessarily, not religion, but a spiritual experience, because those children don't spend any time of the day thinking about just being quiet and thinking and contemplating about other people, what can they do to help others, and so on and so forth. So while I agree with Mr. Bridgewater that quality education involves those things, I'm also of the view now and I accept that I'm old.
I ain't get there yet.
I have to remind, I remember when my father was 60 years old, and nowadays I'm going to be 60 in May, and I have to constantly remind myself that I'm 60. So I'm now my father. And it is a humbling experience. Believe you me, it is a humbling experience. So quality education is everything that Mr. Bridgewater said, but it is a bit more. The experience in the formal education system must be different from what goes on out there on the street. The experiences that the children get, tours to other places, what are religious, the spiritual experiences, and so on and so forth, which is about rounding character. And that is the difficult part. The maths and so on is the easy part, but building character and so on, that's the difficult part. Thanks very much.
Thank you. All right. I'd like to add something to that as well with respect to the formal education. I know that when I was growing up, I was often told, get a good education and you will get a good job. There's a certain sense of disillusionment when we use that terminology to especially young people today to tell them why they should take full advantage of the opportunities provided in school. I think maybe one of the things we could look at is using education to build character, build a person, so that when the person is prepared for life, not just for exams, they will be prepared for what life has to offer. So I think that's another aspect that we can look at. Okay, any more Facebook questions? Okay. Yes. Good morning.
Hi, good morning. A lot of people in here probably don't know me, so I'll introduce myself. My name is Nicolette Frank, and I am the medical faculty representative-elect for the Guild of Students at the University of the West Indies Cable campus. Now, I may be deterring a bit from the whole topic of quality education, but I remember you mentioning before the discussion started, where do we go from here? Mm-hmm. And my belief is that you need to know where here is and how you got here before you know where you go from here. And I believe this discussion has been happening for so many years, since I've been in high school, and I'm 24 going on 25 now, so that's over 10 years ago. This discussion, this exact same discussion, has been happening in the high schools on that student level, trying to find out why is there so much crime and violence amongst the young people. Mm-hmm. And being in high school, I had the opportunity to function as the head girl. And I decided to take a more one-on-one approach as head girl and not just function as head girl over everybody, that kind of thing. So my approach was get to the level of the guys that are on the block, the girls that don't go to class and they're always in the corner with some guy and that kind of thing, and find out, you know, why are they doing the things they're doing? And getting to that level, you realize that everybody at this stage, this UNICEF Youth Development Program, policy-making stage, seems to just circle around the actual issue. Quality education, lack of finances, all these things are secondary to the actual primary issue. I had the opportunity to talk to persons who I would ask a girl, why don't you just go to class and listen? Like, that's what you're here for. And she told me, you know, you won't understand. You, well, in their eyes, I lived a perfect student life, a family that feeds me, takes care of me, father probably drops me to school and all that kind of thing. But she's in a home where her father rapes her almost every day. She's currently pregnant for him. Her mother doesn't care because she's on the outside with somebody else, and her siblings are there, younger than her, and she feels like she's responsible for them, feeding them, making sure they get to school and that kind of thing, because the parents aren't doing that. And coming to school, her one moment of escape from that, she acts out because she feels like nobody around her understands the struggle she goes through when she's not at school. The school feeding program we have, oh, I'm from Trinidad and Tobago, by the way, Tobago specifically. The school feeding program we have at school there is the only meal she has every single day. I don't even know what happened to her on a weekend. You know, you have the guy on the block who just doesn't go to class. Why? Because whoever else is there encouraging him to go, that's who he looks up to. That's who he finds some sort of connection with, because his father don't really care about him doing whatever he does. basically acting as what we locally call a sperm donor, not being a father. And the mother is there trying her best, but at the end of the day, even though the mother may be making ends meet, the child themselves still needs that psychological connection with a parent, having somebody that they feel like they actually care about them and is working towards their well-being. So when we circle around the fact of finances and all these things, these are secondary to the issue. There are people who are troubled with actual issues that mess up the way they think about things. You could go to some of these people and try to tell them, you know, it's okay to talk about this, it's okay to do this, do that. But the way they have developed, the way how they have set up their mind in a defense mechanism standpoint, they don't want to hear what you have to say because they feel like even if I relate to you, you don't understand what I've been through. And the Caribbean has moved forward in a way where as a people, we don't look at the importance of the psychological impact of things and how we deal with those solutions on a psychological level. Because in the primary school, in the high school, you need to, that's where your mind actually develops. After high school, your foundation has already been laid, and whatever you're adding is probably just 20% of what you already have. I could be wrong in terms of numbers, but generally, that's the idea. And that's the stage where you need to instill a certain mindset in people. I mean, they're the lucky ones that defeat the odds. They come out from a horrible household, and they still make it through life. Why is that? They had a different mindset. Whatever would have impacted them at some point in time in their life made them feel like, I still need to be better. I still need to defeat the odds and come out on top and then try to work back for those beneath me. And I really think we need to address that issue specifically because if there are people who have all the finances. I've met people like that. Their family is well off, but there's still that one daughter that's promiscuous and using drugs. And everybody wonders, like, where she really come from because everybody else is perfect, close-knit, suit and tie kind of person. And she's just there living a ridiculous life. But you don't know that underneath she either feels like she's too pressured by the family to live up to a certain standard, or she's probably even experiencing some sort of abuse in the family that nobody else knows because to the outside world, it's a perfect family.
Yeah.
And you have people on all these levels and experiencing all these psychologically impacting experiences, and nobody's actually addressing that. We're all looking at the family struggling financially, they have an influence on persons outside, but that's secondary. Those things actually help proliferate the negative activities that they engage in, but they're not the actual cause, the actual reason for how people are acting out. So I really think we need to address that and then probably look at the secondary issues because all these looking for jobs for people and the different programs to keep kids active and that kind of thing, that only deals with the secondary issues. It doesn't deal with the primary issue. And honestly, I don't have a solution.
What I'm hearing you say, though, is that these individuals need a voice. Problem is, we have got to get that voice to them in a way that they will accept it.
Exactly.
And I think that's
the actual...
That's what.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
So I don't know if you're finished, but your contribution was well received, Nicolette, and I completely agree. We do look at the secondary reasons, and we don't really address the primary reasons. That's how they think, the mindset. But you said it at the end, because that was my question the whole time in my head. How do we address it? Because what is the solution? Because if you think about it, a lot of persons have problems come from broken family homes where abuse is happening in the families, etc. But then how do we address each and every single child or person growing up that's going through that their mindset is being negatively impacted? How do we go about changing that? That's why the solutions I put forward are more, you go into the communities and you try to reason with the students, etc. You give back and you speak to them. But personally, and this was my personal experience, so I'm a part of a charitable organization back home, Minds of the Future, and we go into inner city schools, and we speak and we teach them, we mentor them. And my problem and what I struggle with is that we do it twice for every 4 months, and then I look back and say, does this really, like, we might have given them relief for a couple hours for 2 days, and then at the end of the day they still go back home to the broken homes. What you can't take every if a child says, "Oh, I'm being raped by my father," etc. You put them in you give them social security, you put them in these homes that should be taking care of them, but then they don't, and so the problem is perpetuated, and there's no real solution, and that's the problem I struggle with, and that's what I think we all struggle with. How do you impact each and every child and give them the voice that they accept? Because at the same time you can say, speak out, and chances are they still won't speak out. They're in the schools, as you said, she's in the school, and that might be her chance to escape her reality, but instead she uses it to act out. Mm-hmm. So how do you get them to accept that voice and move forward is the real question. Because at the end of the day, we can't, and I don't want to be a pessimist, but it's the reality is we can't get every student or every child and stop them from wiring their mind that way. That's my contribution.
I'll just add that the problem with some people speaking out is that we've seen in the past a lot of people have spoken out with their issue, and it just made it. Oh, my apologies.
My apologies. So yes, the issue is that yes, some people have spoken out in the past. They have taken that step to let their voices be heard, but it actually made their issue 10 times worse. And people see that and decided, you know what, I'd rather stay in this level 2 issue than go say something and end up at level 10 and have an even worse life.
Agreed, and that's a valid point also. We need to be willing to listen and help when the students do decide, or when the children speak out, because we can't let them situation escalate, and that's not what we want. Agreed.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm asking one of our colleagues from overseas, Mr. Howard Brown, to join the conversation at this time. We should be able to see him via the Zoom link, if possible. Just give him a moment, but he's asked to make a contribution, and I'd like to patch him in at this point. Howard, can you hear us? Howard, we can't hear you. Is your mic on?
Can you hear me?
Is anybody hearing Howard?
Can you hear me, Damani?
So we'll probably just have to move on and get back to Howard. And I'll ask Miss Rice to make a comment. She wanted to make an intervention here, so I'll ask her to make that intervention at this time while we try to solve the technical difficulties with Mr. Brown.
Okay.
Good
Welcome.
morning.
Morning.
Hi, morning. I'd like to thank the presenter earlier on because she kind of segued into what I wanted to say. I'm thankful for this engagement, but I believe if we were speaking of solutions, we need to engage individuals on all levels who are part and parcel of the process. So when we speak of youth violence, why not speak to the individuals who perpetuate it and are affected by it? Because we have these discussions here and it impacts us, but really and truly we need to be able to give sustainable tools to the individuals who are part and parcel of the process. Right. And in speaking of youth violence is very complex, and therefore the solutions we put forward cannot be a one-size-fits-all approach. And I listened to the presentations that were put forward, and I found that we fail to link the social, the cultural, the gender-based, historical aspects of violence that make it so difficult to resolve. Because we ask ourselves, why is violence continuing, but has the society that has allowed violence to continue transformed fundamentally? And the answer is no. And if we are to find solutions in changing youth violence and the statistics that are out there, we need to be able to change the structures that present themselves. A comment was made as it pertains to education and some persons being afforded the right. I am from the island of St. Lucia, and many of our Caribbean territories don't afford free education to individuals. So that's one aspect that many individuals lack, and therefore don't have the tools that they need to really build themselves and say that there is an alternative to what is being presented here today. Mm-hmm. In terms of engagement as well, when we speak of the agency of people, culturally as well, we have seen through our music, through what we consume and what we create, that we perpetuate, and as you rightfully said, we normalize violence in such a way that it becomes normal and comfortable, and so we don't change anything about it. And my solution in moving forward would be to look at the varied aspects of violence and to treat them with respect, and to change our identity of how we look at young people in general as simply employees, because beyond having a job or earning a salary, people want purpose in their lives. And sometimes, beyond getting money from a gang, there is a sense of belonging and social inclusion. And if we speak about youth violence and youth in general, we need to think about the connections in generations, about how we treat each other and how we relate to each other within society in terms of volunteerism, mentorship, and ensuring that someone cares for me, that we are human in relation to each other. And if the community is strengthened and we foster these links where there's not only economic benefits to individual, but that social aspect, I think we can resolve the issues of violence that we're having. And when we speak to individuals and listen to them, because I think that's an aspect that's missing as well, we can have some meaningful transformation. So that's my contribution today.
Thank you so much. Okay. And it ties in with what Nicolette had been saying earlier about where we are right now. Because I find that the word society is used a lot, but it's used in my estimation, in type of a fantasy island situation where we do not address all the levels of our society when we use that word. And many, many times when we're talking about violence, criminal activity, youth in crisis, we only think about one part of the society, and that's the society that we consider to be the lower end of the society, where in truth and in fact, we have youth in crisis throughout our society, at the very top even. But we have got to change our mindset to include everyone in our definition of society and to take a real true assessment of where our society is right now. So I thank you both for that. Okay. Do we have a mic for Howard? Okay. Okay, the mic is open. Can you get a little closer to the mic, please?
Sure, no problem. Good morning once again, everybody.
Morning.
I just want to take this opportunity. The discussion has been interesting so far. I just want to take this opportunity to ask the members on stage, those who have given the presentations, the discussions, and some of the members in the room at the moment. The current position of violence within the Caribbean region is one that is on the increase. I want to ask you, what is your perspective in the direction that violence will be heading within the next 5 years? Or do you believe it's going to be a situation where it gets worse? Is it going to get better? Are the policies that are coming out, is it something that you believe that we can work together to solve and mitigate and, more or less be in a particular situation where we are in a position where it gets better? Particularly the members on stage, I'm very interested in hearing your perspectives and then open up the floor, if possible, to one or two members in the audience. I'm very interested in hearing your perspectives on this question.
Well, I believe.
I'm not sure it's on.
Well, I believe that it could become better if we all stand up and become agents of change for the society that we desire to live in. Ethiopia, as some people will fantasize it to become. But if we do not seriously take a stance and come together, it will become worse. One aspect that really contributes to this broken society is that children are parenting children. And I understand Nicolette's point with the young lady having her father's child, So now she has to be looking at raising her siblings, raising that child that she did not want. So the issue of teenage pregnancies and then being to the fact that they became pregnant in the first place mean that there was a lack of discipline and a lack of manners and a lack of social graces within the household. Therefore, how can you expect a child to pass on the morals that are very important to maintain a society? So we, as a society, must try to really tackle the issue of children parenting children, to then use the teachers within our schools and the guidance counselors especially to teach standards that we would like to see.
In my opinion, I hope it gets better, but right now, children are taught on violence because really and truly they're angry. As what Nicolette said with the child, she might not be doing well at school because of what's happening at home, and she's angry, she doesn't know what to do. Some children are taught on violence because their mother or father might be doing something hurting them, and they know they can't do nothing with the mother or father, so they take it out on children at school. They don't know what to do, they're just very angry at the world, they don't know. But if we come together, we can help the children, the youth. I hope that it gets better from here on.
All right, so my opinion is that youth violence can decrease in the next 5 years. I say that because in Jamaica there has been a fall in number of youth-related deaths perpetuated by youth and affecting youth. There's also a community named Augustown, which was a very violent neighborhood, gang-based wars regularly, etc. And they went an entire year without a death because of programs that were put in place in the community. There's also this program, the Youth Development Program, which was partnering with UNICEF, as well as the CARICOM initiative on youth violence, going into this, going on a grassroots level and dealing with individuals, going into the communities to try and break this cycle of youth violence. So I think it can decrease in the next 5 years, but it depends on the effectiveness of these programs, because we can say whatever we want on paper, but if there's no action, if we're not genuinely going into the communities to effect change, then we can see that it will continue to get worse.
Thank you so much. We are very pressed for time, so I'm asking our speakers to make it very short. Thank you.
It will be, don't worry. All right, good morning, everybody. I just want to say what Kai was saying. I don't believe, I'm a teacher, I've been a teacher, and I don't believe it can be 100% reduced, but it can be reduced. Now, my solution I wanted to add is that I feel like we need to put psychological, as Nicolette was saying, programs in place. So how about we have certain counseling programs and certain psychological help programs from a young age, from that primary school, because I teach at a secondary school, and I feel like when they already come to me, I have to change their mentality, and it's really difficult. But if we have more psychological programs from a younger age, I know a lot of people would say spiritual, but it's the same thing, psychological, etc. It will really help a lot.
Thank you so much. Okay.
Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Jamal Ferdinand. I'm just going to be very short. Two things. One, I agree with the minister first and foremost on the matter of discipline in schools. That's where you start in the mind developing and instill values. And I remember I've thought a while back on this issue, and what came to mind was, are we willing, or would we say that in schools we make it compulsory that students join certain programs, whether sporting programs, cadetting, volunteering activities that can, help give them some meaning of purpose and keep them off the blocks, etc. in the afternoon. And secondly, on the issue of social issues in the Caribbean, what stood out to me is that governments place less emphasis. If you look at the budgets throughout the Caribbean, governments place less emphasis on social issues, especially when you're looking at the Ministry of whether social mobilization or social welfare. And if that is the case, how do you really push governments to shape their policy and actually at least within the government expenditure, place more funds to help communities and people to resuscitate, even in terms of prisoners? when their time is served, how do we include them back in society to prevent them from going back into the very institution?
Okay, thank you very much. Yes.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Cox. Well, I have a few questions, but I think we're going to have to wrap up because we have the minister's presentation, and I want to thank everyone for their presentations this morning. We're going to have to more or less leave it there, but we will have more time for this discussion outside, and I thank everyone for your contributions. Thank you all so much. So,
And
Ms.
at
Talcott,
this
your
stage,
closing comment.
my closing comment is the solution, as was said earlier, is just beyond our reach at this time if we will continue to only talk about the problems. We've got to look consciously at what we determine to be viable things forward and try them. Let's start somewhere. I think we should start by actually understanding where we are right now in a truthful way, and then we'll go from there. I know that we're pressed for time, so I will stop now, and like I said, the conversation will continue outside. Thank you very much. Turn it back over to Mr. Paris.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all so much. Thank you very much. What a dynamic conversation this morning, and I think that I want to ask you to give the presenters and, of course, the persons who are asking questions another round of applause. Thank you very much. At this time, I wish to just ask another expert to make a very short presentation in the form of Mr. Imran Richards. He is going to share a bit of his experience about the criminal justice system and his work with persons who are leaving the prison system here in Barbados. He is a community worker and an activist, and I will ask him to come and make a short presentation on his experience and what that means for the context of solving some youth violence issues in our region. Thank you. Mr. Richards.
Hey, morning everybody. How you guys doing? Having good discussions? Okay. I'm not sure if I'm going to get really to the stuff that Damani shared about. I want to share a bit about my experience. One of the challenges that I find is that you are as effective as your awareness. And oftentimes, because people lack awareness, then they're completely ignorant in the actual sense of the words as it relates to the necessary strategies that are needed to be implemented in order to really drive change, right? That is one of the first things. And the reason I said that is because a lot of individuals pontificate and are able to clearly articulate what, in their opinion, is the issue with relation to gun violence and crime and gang life. But people hardly take the time to understand those individuals who are involved and engaged in it, right? And so we come up with solutions that we think they need because we think we understand what their problems are. We think we understand the ghetto, but the reality is that so many of these roundtable discussions are not centered around the grassroots experience of the lived everyday situation of individuals. I grew up in the ghetto, and I took my first marijuana joint at the age of 11 years old. My uncle was a robber. So I was accustomed to 6 and 5 in the morning, 6 and 7 police jeeps surrounding the house. I was accustomed to the door being kicked down, ants being pushed by the police, little cousins being scared because these guys in blue or who don't have any uniforms don't have guns out. And they're searching the rooms and so forth. My grandmother had 2 strokes as a result of the lifestyle that myself and my uncles led. Every single meal in my family smoked. My father tried to commit suicide on 2 occasions. Drank Gamoxone, ended up in the hospital for several weeks, almost died, because he was addicted to cocaine. And one of the things that I find is a significant problem is that knowledge is not the biggest driver of change. Because, you see 7 people go down the road and fall into a well. It will make sense to you, yeah, logically. If I go down that road too, then it is highly probable that I am going to fall into the same well. Somehow, even though many of our young people are growing up every day and they have perfect examples of what not to do, they still find themselves making the exact same decisions that they are able to see on a regular basis. So the issue is not knowledge necessarily. The issue is consistency of information. The issue is environment. And a study was done, and the study actually showed that knowledge is one of the least drivers of change. But if you take an individual and you remove them from the environment that they're in, you place them in a different environment, all of a sudden, that person, you begin to see the potential shift, right? And I realized that these young people, every single day, their home environments are volatile. This is where they live. Their school environments are volatile. They may have exposure once a week to Sunday school. But you think after hearing what they hear once a week for 1 hour at Sunday school, but they return to that environment, you really believe that that is going to make a difference? So yes, well, you're not necessarily a product of your circumstances, you're a product of your choices. Your choices are by and large affected and impacted by what you experience. Your environment shapes. And so I believe that a lot of our programs, you know, I speak at parent-teacher meetings. And oftentimes at the parent-teacher meetings, guess who are there? The parents that don't need to be there. And in a lot of our sessions, the programs that we plan, we don't have the right people in the room. You know why? Because we don't go where they are. And I think this is the challenge. We need to go where the people are. We need to invade their communities. We need to be intentional about ensuring that we are consistently in their faces providing other alternatives. Because oftentimes they don't feel, yes, they may hear somebody's success story, they may hear somebody like myself who come from the block, but they hear that once a term or once a year. And so while they're excited about it, in that moment, something happens between the session and the door. When they go back through the door, they're faced with their world again, and all of a sudden they begin to think, but that can't happen to me. This is all I know. This is what I'm supposed to give myself to. And if you don't have a vision for your life, somebody else will have one for you. So the drug man had one for me. Started to sell drugs, started to smoke a lot of marijuana, got expelled from school. Left school with 2 CXCs because of gang violence. I couldn't go into town. My life was in a mess, right? And I am one of the success stories. How many more like me who are finding themselves in this cycle over and over? So in the prison system, I speak there on Tuesdays. And at the end of every session, I'm gonna wrap it now. At the end of every session, people come up to me and they say, Imran, if only. I mean, tears, snot coming out the nose. I mean, sessions really impacted their lives. And if only, if only, if only. They're filled with regret. But the challenge is, how do I take what you've shared and apply it to my life consistently? Is one thing to, you see, the issue is, how do I have my feet in the culture but have my mind above it? Because it's so easy to get caught up. And so I think that is where we need to concentrate. We need to take more programs to the communities. I always say that your future is not ahead of you, your future is inside of you. But what is inside of you is determined by what is happening on the outside. You know, and so thoughts become things. And we need to get in these young people's faces. And the final thing I'll say is that somebody once said to me, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. I shared it with a guy, a friend of mine.
I can't hear it, Dwayne.
A month ago, he came back to me. He said, Imran, I want you share something that deeply impacted my life. And I've been thinking about it for a long time. And here's what I've come up with concerning the same quote. He says, people do not care how much you care until they know how much you care. And a lot of these young people, they can pick up fate from a mile off. They need people who are genuinely interested in their welfare, in their social development, in their situations, people who genuinely believe in them that they can make a difference. And if we go with that heart, if we go to serve them in that regard, if we are interested, genuinely interested in them, we won't treat them like projects with a timeline. Oh, you mean after a year you want to change it? I done with you. You really weren't interested? Because the process of change is not easy. And we treat people, because we don't really care, we treat them like projects instead of people. So we give them a timeline. You know, you should get it together by now. You know, if God did that to me, I don't know where it would be. Right? So I want to challenge you guys to be agents of change. It takes sacrifice. It takes servant leadership. You need to be patient with it. Blessings.
Thank you very much, Imran, yet again. I want to, at this time, invite the Minister of State in the Ministry of Education, Senator Husbands, to bring remarks on behalf of the people and government of Barbados. Minister, if you will. Thank you so much.
I think that the last thing you really want to hear this morning, coming to the close of such an important session, is another speech from another politician. But let me close by saying how sincerely impactful this program this morning has been for me. When I left home, the Minister of Education is away, and I've been asked to stand in and deputize on his behalf. And when I left home, I did not expect to find the level and quality of presentations and comment that I have heard. One young lady said that we've done these things before and so on and so forth, but she said she was 24 years old. I want to say that in my time, we are living in a completely different age, in an age in which topics like these are open for public discussion and the views of young people are taken into consideration. I don't remember growing up in a time when you would have a forum like this for young people to step forward with a topic like this and make the kind of comments that you have made this morning. So in that regard, I want to compliment you and to say to you that in all seriousness, these are the types of views that policymakers take on board. But I want you to bear in mind that in all of our countries, not only at this time, but at all times, the resources are extremely slender, and we have to make real-time decisions on the allocation of these resources. So sometimes it may appear as though the resources are not properly allocated, but I am convinced that in all our countries, serious consideration is given when time comes for the allocation of these resources. It has been really an educational and uplifting environment discussion this morning. The other point I want to make rather quickly is the issue of dealing, not only the young lady articulated very well about primary issues and secondary issues, but our societies, again, we have not yet reached the stage where we place great emphasis on psychology and how people think and what influences thought and so on and so forth. We have not, in Barbados, for example, we have now only reached the stage of having in primary schools in Barbados counselors, because we recognize how serious, even at the elementary school level, how serious the challenges that many of our students have. But again, we have to allocate resources. And at this stage, we are not in a position to provide psychologists and social workers in every single elementary school. So some schools have to share. But believe you me, that is a serious advance from the time I was at primary school, when you were not encouraged even to think of issues in that way. I want to close by also saying that as important as it is for us to discuss issues like this and so on, and focus on young people in our societies that have various problems, I always like, though, to end by saying that the vast majority of the young people in our region, even in the inner city communities, are decent, hard. They get up every morning and go to school. They get up every morning and go to work. They are church-going people, the vast majority. So we don't want to, while it is necessary for us to focus on the challenges, we definitely don't want to do so at the expense of those people, or you don't want to send the message that for the society to focus on you, you must be on the block. The people on the block are the minority. The vast majority of our young people are doing the right thing. But once we say that, we can't be a really advanced society if we ignore the challenges that we face. Again, I want to close by thanking you for this opportunity and wishing you all the very best. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Senator Husbands, for that intervention, and for reminding us, of course, of the very, very critical point that we must remember that the vast majority of the young people are doing the right thing. And I think that the members present today are, of course, a testament to that. As they mentioned, and as Kai mentioned, there are the young leaders in our regional society, and will be the people sitting at the tables where you want sat, Senator, and leading the region forward in one form or another. And I want to thank them this morning for their participation. This morning, I have the responsibility of moving the vote of thanks. And in so doing, I want to start by thanking Senator Husbands for his attendance and for representing the government of Barbados at this morning's session, and for bringing those comments and those viewpoints that he brought to the discussion. Senator Husbands, thank you. I want to thank the staff of UNICEF, the deputy representative, and of course the communication specialist, Mr. Oh dear, Patrick, I've forgotten your last name, just at that point. My apologies. But Mr. Knight, yes, I want to thank you and all of the persons who would have made this morning possible through their very hard work and their efforts to make sure that we had a very successful Activate Talks. It was a wonderful session. I want to thank Team Action International Incorporated for their continued work at strengthening the youth and the young people in our society. And I want to thank our presenters who would have presented this morning in the form of Mr. Bridgewater, Mr. Howell, and Ms. Arthur Brewster. Thank you for your contribution this morning. Mr. Maxi Baldeo and his team, who would have made all things technical possible, including the live stream and the contributions from our colleagues at the Regional Guild of Students. I want to thank the Office of Recruitment and Marketing, who would have also provided some support in providing me with the questions this morning from the Facebook and the social media. The Office of Public Information, who has worked hard to ensure that things are put in place in terms of the media being present this morning, and of course, providing additional support on the social media for our reference. I want to thank the Guild of Students, especially the Guild of Students here locally at the Cave Hill campus, and of course our regional colleagues of the Guild of Students who would have joined us via the Zoom link and who are participating and sending comments and contributions, and who, despite technical efforts, wanted to make sure that they were here to add their voice to the discussion this morning. I want to thank them. I want to thank the island associations who would have been made themselves present this morning from the Cave Hill campus, who would have all come at this very busy examination time to add to this discussion so that we can ensure that we have a fruitful discussion on the subject of violence and on issues that affect us all. I want to thank, of course, the media for their presence this morning and the persons who are working assiduously behind the scenes to ensure that everything came together this morning in the way that it did. This event would be nothing without this audience, and I want to thank all of the members who would have made it up and who would have added in their own way to the discussion that we had. Without you, this would not have been possible. And I would ask that you all give yourselves a round of applause. Good morning. My only task after the vote of thanks is, of course, to end the session. But But I want to make note of some of the comments that we would have been receiving as it relates to the social media, just at the end as we continue the discussion outside. Some of which asks about the revamping and rejuvenation of our family values in society and attempts to bring out the best in our children. Of course, there were comments made about the existence of examples and initiatives in the school environment to tackle youth crime and violence. And Sky would have mentioned the clubs and societies and so on as was raised as a relevant issue that we need to continue as we leave the discussion this morning. And of course, what environment exists to encourage the youth to lead and to be the change in society that they want to be. These are the issues that we must depart thinking about. And I want to, of course, note Mr. Brown's comments, because he sent one to me that he wanted to hear. And given the fact that he was not able to speak as he wanted, I wanted to make sure that we did not end without having Mr. Brown be able to say his piece. And he said, I strongly believe that as a region, we need to take a productive approach in combating the issue of violence. All hands are indeed needed on deck, and the church, schools, government, and society, and the communities themselves need to speak about this, as they're not speaking about it enough. We need to all get involved in the fight. And I think that is the note that we can end on. Good morning, everyone.